live right here on this channel. This is a very different live. In fact, I don't even have the term live attached to it, which I normally do these days on this channel. This is a kind of special live. You could tell by the title, it's a kind of special live for this channel. It's called My Experience. The title of this live actually derives from, I don't know whether it was the area in Vegas or the ride. I'd heard about it from friends who were Star Trek fans, other friends who were Star Trek fans. But the Star Trek experience in Vegas, I don't think it's around anymore. But I liked, I had that name stuck in my head, and I thought, okay, so I'm calling this My Star Trek Experience. And again, it's a very different live, very distinctive live, a unique live from the others that I've done. Last year, I had done a live about writing seminars, and I talked about conducting them and doing like a couple of them. And that live, which I expected really to not garner any kind of um, viewership, got more viewers than I expected and more views than I expected. So that's kind of the precedent for this live because I talked a little about my life. And the reason why I say my life is because this channel was set up when I opted to be on YouTube. The channel was set up initially as a movie and TV channel and analysis channel. So, movie and TV analysis. And I revamped it relatively recently, like a few months ago, and now it's a miscellaneous channel. So I have my YouTube show and my movie life. So I do with movies to an extent, but I also do lives about various subjects. So we had the precedent of the writing seminar live that got more views. But what also occurred recently is I was watching the movie Trekkies, which is a documentary about Star Trek fans, and of course Star Trek. And I was watching that on YouTube, and I hadn't seen Trekkies in a long time. I'd seen it in the theater, and if you are a Star Trek fan, fanatic, admirer, whatever it is that you are, I recommend looking at Trekkies. Though I think it's free thus far on YouTube, because I saw it like this week. So I highly recommend you take a look at that. You probably have if you're a fan already, but take a look at it again. So that was really the real inspiration for my doing this live. Um, as I mentioned, I never. I'm. This isn't a personal channel. I already have an official channel, and I'll maybe be doing a live about Star Trek on that channel as well. But this is not a personal channel. It's a channel that dealt with movie and TV. It's a miscellaneous channel. So we'll see. And so I don't talk about my life. I don't talk about aspects of my life. I don't care to discuss that. Doesn't seem interesting. After all, I'm not a celebrity. People don't know me. What's the point? But watching Trekkies, I thought, you know what? Why don't I talk about Star Trek? Because I am a longtime Star Trek fan, lifelong, really. Excuse me. I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and it's really something I've only talked about with friends in my sci-fi club that I was a part of, and at conventions that I've been to, Comic Con conventions that I've been to. So I beyond the orbit of, I guess you could call it, professional and amateur fandom, I haven't really discussed Star Trek in a formal way. My personal view has been that it's really, I never really gave it any thought. So this is a live that's going to deal with that. I've done a couple lives recently. They were really successful. I really don't know what, unlike people who are on YouTube, I when I do these lives, I just do them and I put them out there. I take a look at the views, and you know, and you compare it to the subscriber count and all that. But I really don't keep up with much beyond that for the channel. I don't micromanage the channel. Not that there's anything wrong with looking at the data and analytics and all that, but I don't micromanage the channel. I put the stuff out there, you see how it does, and you move on. So this again is going to be a very different live compared to lives that I've done. I've never really done this. Certainly, I've never done this on YouTube. I have no idea if there are going to be people that are interested or anything. And maybe there will be Star Trek fans who watch. I don't know. So we'll see what happens. So as I mentioned before, I don't really talk about my life here on this channel or in any other channel. But what I will say is I've been a lifelong Star Trek fan. I started watching Star Trek from the time I was a kid. And I would come home from school, and I think it was on in syndication when I was a kid in the 70s. So I think I would come home and watch, if I could recall correctly, I would come home and watch Star Trek and Gilligan's Island. So those were like two shows I would watch after school. So it really started then. Obviously, I've seen movies about Star Trek. And so and so when it comes to Star Trek, unlike people who are hardcore Trekkers and Trekkies, I don't really, right off the bat, I should say, I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm a Trekker. I'm not a Trekkie. I don't like that term. It's terrible. But I really have never really had the time to do anything more than basically watch shows. I have to be brutally honest. I've never really been able to do much. I'm not really fanatically into Trek, unlike friends of mine or others who are into Star Trek. Like they will get collectibles, they'll get action figures, they'll get models of the Enterprise, depending on which Enterprise you're talking about, or Voyager, or I'm sure there's a model of Deep Space Nine. I don't know, it's been a while. Um, or anything else. They'll get all kinds of stuff. So I don't want to stay long here, but I'm here to try to talk a little about what my experiences have been when I'm in terms of Star Trek. What my experience has been. Thus the title. I've only been to one Star Trek convention, and because I never really had time to go to Star Trek conventions, I was a freelance writer and journalist for about 22 years, and in my hometown, I think they had the Star Trek conventions that were helmed by Creation, the company Creation. I think Creation was behind them. But they had some, I think, in the 90s. I was never able to attend because I was busy with other stuff. And I really didn't get to go until many years later. They finally had a convention in Honolulu, which is where I was when I attended the Star Trek convention. Now, for those of you who, if there are any non-Star Trek fans that have not been here, part of the reason I'm wearing this shirt is there are conventions, of course, across the country, right? And I'm just looking at this. In Nevada over here, they have the Las Vegas. That's a big one, Star Trek. And of course, in various other states, they have you have Utah. I think Salt Lake has its con. I don't know if they have Star Trek one there, but I know in Nevada over here, they have. You can't really see it, but look at this show. So, by the way, hi to the chat. So I went to. They finally brought one to my town a number of years ago. It was. As is with most Star Trek, if you've seen Trekkies, the documentary Trekkies, and if you haven't, I recommend that you take a look at it. I think it's still free on YouTube. If you look at the scenes in Trekkies where you obviously see, because they mostly are filming, not entirely, but mostly filming at conventions, it's pretty standard. It's a Star Trek con. will largely, which are the more specific types. We're not talking Comic Cons here. We're talking Star Trek Con. The Star Trek cons are pretty basic. At least the one that I went to was it, because I've only been able to attend one. I always was busy. I couldn't get to the others. I've been to one, and it's pretty standard hotel. It's the pretty standard formula of, for those of you who've never been, you have the dealer room, collectibles room, right? And at the convention that I went to, that was maybe a little bigger than this part of my apartment that I'm in now. It's probably, if I double this space, this room here in my, if I double maybe one part of this apartment, is probably the space of the dealer room. And the dealer rooms are collectible rooms. If it's a small con, small convention, those are where you have all the items for sale, right? Where you get your collectibles. If you're into collecting action figures, toys, models, other kinds of aspects, comic books, other kinds of things. So I went to a convention. I've only been to one Star Trek con. And when I went to the convention, this was probably around 2010, I imagine, 2010 or 2011. Um, I guess that you were allowed like a couple of free photos, which was nice. So let me show you from the convention that I attended what I got. So this is from. I had to take this out of you know my folder, which is tucked away. This is actually, so I got a couple of photos. Um, this is not from the original series, just so that I can delineate this. This is not from the original series. This is from the reboot. I think this is J.J. Abrams' reboot of Star Trek with the brand new cast. And Leonard Nimoy is also in the reboot. In case you don't know, this is for all the non-Star Trek fans that are watching this. So this is from the reboot. So this is one, just so that you know. Got this at the convention. So, of course, the new Lieutenant Uhura, right here. And in case you want it extreme close up, there you go. All right. And I also have a group shot of the new, at the time, the new Spock, the new Uhura, and the new Captain Kirk. So here you go. Nice, right? And extreme close up. All right. So I got both of these at the convention that I attended. Both of these photos. So, uh, looks like I'm going to be moving soon. So if everything works out, so I'm going to have to take these with me. They're already tucked away. So I like the attitude. I don't know why I like the attitude. If you see her attitude, I like that. I like that for some reason. The uncovered, like that added. They had this. I don't know swag, but it's attitude with these. I don't like swag, but so this came from a convention that these two came. These two were from a convention that I went to, in my hometown, right? So you were given out. You were allowed like a couple to choose from, right? And this is from the new one, the then new one. So let me just talk about the convention that I attended. I had never attended a Star Trek convention before, and I know some people aren't going to like this, but it was both fun and frustrating. It was fun and frustrating for me. I enjoyed myself because I went for a day, but I was there were some things I didn't like, right? Like you had a couple of the actors that were playing Klingons. That played Klingons on Star Trek. and they were there in I think pretty full makeup as Klingons. But they were up there with their mics and they were telling a bunch of like lame jokes. So I was like telling my friends afterwards, I'm like, really? I paid a few bucks to see stand up Klingons, really? What is this? An evening at Kablak? I don't know. It was like I don't want to see Last Klingon Standing. I'm not in that. But these guys were telling jokes, really. It's the actors that were on Star Trek. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen to. The whole point of my going to a convention is to hear behind the scenes stories, production stories, filming, all this kind of stuff. And these guys are telling, I don't know, and these guys are telling one-liners. I mean, it was just pretty freaking lame to me. But yeah, that's what I was telling my friends afterward. Was Last Klingon Standing. It was really odd, and I hate saying this because actually I don't hate saying this. I gotta be honest. I know there are people who will talk about Star Trek and they will rhapsodize everything and they will make everything out to be sugar and spice and everything nice, and it's all wonderful and rosy. But no, I did not like that. I did not like the stand-up Klingons. I did not. I hated that part of the show. There were some other parts though that were fun. I think you had a Star Trek researcher there. He had to sit down. I think Richard Arnold is his name. He had to sit down and he was talking about various Star Trek projects. That was great. And I believe, and here's something that happened years ago. A number of years ago, they held a what was a mini con. It wasn't a full scale convention. It was mostly a small event, small hotel conference room in my hometown. This was years before, and I think it was presided over by Richard Arnold, who was the Star Trek researcher. Now, if you're a Star Trek fan, you'll know that he worked with Gene Roddenberry. He was like a right hand man to Gene, very involved with I think from about the 70s, 60s onward, I guess. He was very involved, and of course, he was involved in other aspects. I think he was also involved when Gene was doing, excuse me. I think he was involved when Gene was doing Next Gen, Star Trek Next Generation. So I met Richard Arnold at this mini con years ago. Nice guy, and had a good time there. Uh, and it was interesting. One of the pieces of advice I recall that he stated was, if you visit Paramount Pictures, I don't know if they give tours there, but he was saying at the time, this was I think about the time that Enterprise was on the air. I think it was about Enterprise. Um, and those of you who are not Star Trek fans who don't know what Enterprise is, look it up. I'm not going to explain it. I can't explain everything because this video this live would go 5 hours if I had to explain every Star Trek series and every permutation. It'd be 5 hours, and nobody wants that. I love Star Trek. I love a Star Trek, adore Star Trek, but I don't want to. Even I don't want to speak for 5 hours about Star Trek, as much as I love it. So I was at a mini con, and so that's where I met Richard Arnold. Um, One of the things I saw Trekkies, which is on YouTube. I also saw I also saw a documentary that's out called Chaos on the Bridge. That's another one I highly recommend. Really, do non-Star Trek fans, if you or newer ones, if you just got into Star Trek, I highly recommend that documentary. Richard Arnold is interviewed in that, I believe, by Bill Shatner, and who interviews a number of people, writers, producers, and others who are involved with Star Trek Next Generation. So, yeah, so I met Richard Arnold at that mini con a number of years ago. I think it was when Enterprise was still on the air. And I remember one of the things that he said was, if you're visiting Paramount Studios, I don't know if they give tours there, but he said, don't tell them you're a Star Trek fan. Don't tell them that. It was kind of interesting to me. I guess they're wary of Star Trek. I don't know if that's still their modus operandi or their mindset over there at Paramount. I hope not. Um, Hell, they invested in more Star Trek series like Discovery and Picard. So, but you never know. Um, in any event, so I'd been to this. I had been to this small event, which was a mini con. It wasn't a full fledged convention. Then I went several years later to the convention, and so Arnold was there. Richard Arnold was there, and he was talking about various Star Trek projects or what might come up at the time, news about it. That was a great part of it. The one thing that I recall about conventions, and I've said this maybe once or twice to people, Star Trek conventions are unlike any other event that I've been to because everything, and I mean everything, is monetized. Everything. These two photos that I have right now, these were free. Hard to believe, but it's true. They were free. Normally, if you want to get photos like this, it's going to cost you money. You know, I could actually sell these. And one of these days I may have to, but I haven't already. I've had these for I don't know how many years, 10 years maybe? I don't know how many years. But I could sell these and I would get maybe a good deal of money for them because I kept them in good shape. Everything, and I mean everything at the conventions is monetized beyond belief. And for those of you who know Jonathan Frakes, you'll understand that reference. Um, so if you're talking about photos, something like this it wouldn't be surprising. I wouldn't be surprised if you had people that were charging $20 a piece for these. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they were charging 50. Now, I'm not saying that is the cost that you will find at a convention. I'm just using this as an example. Everything is monetized at a Star Trek convention, unlike everything. So they have events, they have private events, and all these kind of events. There are dollar signs attached to everything, and so they'll tell you when they make the announcements. Oh, we've got Armin Shimmerman, who played Quark on DS9. He's going to be giving a poetry reading. That'll cost $20 to get it. And then you've got Terry Farrell, who was one of the actresses also on DS9. She's going to be making an appearance. It costs $30 to get in, and so on and so on. You can have lunch with, you know, Kate Mulgrew, who was the captain on Voyager, right? That'll cost you. It's $100 for the lunch. Um, Everything is monetized at Star Trek conventions. It's like the title of that Oscar-winning movie. When it comes to money, it's everything, everywhere, all at once. That's the best way I can describe the finances and economics of Star Trek. Everything is monetized. Everything. I've never seen everything has a dollar sign attached to it. And so the conventions themselves are. So I had a good time at the convention, but there were a couple of drawbacks. But it's like any other. It's not like any other event. The money aspect of it is enormous. Financial aspect is tremendous. These are these are. I wouldn't call these cash cows. I would call them mints. That's what I would call them. They're turning out money. They're turning it out. And that's why someone like Paramount, that's why Paramount has all of these Star Trek series. Lower Decks and Discovery and Picard. I think Picard just ended. That's why, and I don't know that they've. I don't know if they're going to be doing movies again. But that's Strange New Worlds. I forgot about that. Uh, and so that's why it is a profit center. It's a money making machine to start the world of conventions. Right. So, and I used to write for Ain't It Cool News. Um, I don't know if I should talk about that. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe if I do a couple more interviews, if somebody wants me to be interviewed about that. But I used to write for Ain't It Cool, but I never did that side of it. The kind of sci-fi comic book superhero side of it. I was covering serious movies, art house films, and foreign films, and all that. But enough of that jazz. So I've been to Comic Cons also, um, and I've been to Comic Cons also, and Comic Cons are different to me when it comes to Star Trek. A Star Trek convention is to me the ultimate kind of immersive experience if you're a Star Trek fan, because it's all Star Trek all the time. Whereas if you go to a Comic Con, and you may have someone from one of the Star Trek series there. You may have an event that deals with Star Trek, but it's really about various other types of movies and TV shows and all this. So when it comes to Star Trek, uh, so yeah, I've been to the. Sorry, I'm like trying to. Ugh. Sorry about that. So anyway, the last word that I'll say about the conventions is that it it's really the kind of when you go to a Star Trek convention or a Comic Con, it's really the only kind of place if you're a Star Trek fan where you can have the kind of fruitful, um, detailed, unless you're part of a local sci-fi club or Star Trek club, it's really the only kind of place where you can have detailed kind of just conversations about Star Trek, because you can't really have that in everyday life, because most people, the reality is you have to be very careful as a Star Trek fan. Like that's why I was wary about doing this. I really didn't want to do this because this live stream, because I didn't know if I would get people trying to attack my channel again, or troll my channel, or try to come at me with kind of hate or stuff like people. For all this talk about Star Trek being a kind of iconic TV show or series, being a Star Trek fan is not really seen in a very positive light by a lot of people. A lot of people look down on people who are Star Trek fans. It's not really considered a positive. And as somebody who was a fan, I never made a big deal about it. Like, I had no problem talking about it a few times at high school or whatever it is. Because when I was in high school, Next Gen came out, meaning Next Generation came out. But I wasn't somebody that wore Star Trek on my sleeve. I was a fan, and that was it. Um, you know, again, for me, or maybe not again, for me, it's been a very limited experience. For me, I've only been able to do certain things in regards to Star Trek because I was a freelance writer and journalist for about 22 years. So I was busy working. And I never really was into some of the stuff that Star Trek fans are into. I'm not into collectibles. I mean, yeah, I have the photos, but I have very few kind of, I don't know if you could call it memorabilia. I don't have memorabilia. I have very few items in relation to Star Trek. Now here are a couple that I do. Some others that I have. I had to, excuse me, I had to take these out because I hadn't. So I have this, which is Star Trek: The Photo Story. Look, this is Star Trek: The Motion Picture, or as I like to call it, Star Trek: The Unemotional Picture, and as others have called it, Star Trek: The Motionless Picture. And I also call it Star Trek: The Motion Sickness Picture. No. But I'll stick. Yeah, Star Trek: The Motion Sickness Picture is my take on it. I actually like Star Trek: The Motion Picture. So I like Star Trek the Motion. I like the original Star Trek. There aren't. I don't know how many fans there are of the first Star Trek movie, but I liked the Star Trek movie. I liked it. And for those of you who want to close up, here you go. There you go. So they had these photo stories years ago in the 70s of various types of movies and TV shows. I think Battlestar Galactica had one. And so it goes through the entire movie, like this. Looks nice, right? Looks nice, doesn't it? I believe, yeah, this is Spock. As you can see, this is Spock going through the Kolinahr on planet Vulcan, on Vulcan. The Kolinahr, of course, is the purging ritual of Vulcans. It's the essentially the removal of emotion, the purging of emotion. It's almost like going through some kind of I wouldn't say die. It's almost like going through a period of physical uh, fitness and fasting almost. Not quite, but in order to get all your emotions out. So that was it. What else can I do? It's Klingons. Klingons here. Alrighty. I believe, let me see. Yeah. Also here. I believe this is hold up. I believe that's like a Konar D class Klingon vessel, if I recall correctly. This was a nice one. Enterprise going to warp, I believe. All right. And so this is Star Trek, the motion picture, as I like to call it. Star Trek, the unemotional picture. And this one actually is falling apart. But this is considered one of the so-called best, if not the best. And this is falling apart. But this is Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. Right, so this is Star Trek II. Considered the goal of Star Trek films for Star Trek fans. I think maybe others as well. Right. Not as much as that was in full color. This one's black and white. See that? Yeah, that's black and white. So I think that's about it. Like I said, I could talk endlessly about Star Trek. I could talk forever and a day about Star Trek and my thoughts and aspects about that. But I think that'll be about it. If people want, we'll see how things go, and maybe I'll do follow up. It depends. I doubt it. But that's a little window. I didn't talk too much. I didn't go into my details about what I think of this controversy or this aspect. I just dealt with the experience of being a fan at the events that I've been to, and in relation to the Star Trek oriented events, because that's interesting to me. That's interesting to talk about, or at least better to talk about. And so that's it. Well, thanks for watching. Until next time, bye, folks.